Welcome everyone. This is the Jenkins Platform SIG meeting, the first of 2026. Today we're on January 13, 2026, and around the virtual table we have Chris Stern, Mark Waite, and myself, Bruno Versten. Welcome. On the agenda today, I have a Java 17 and 21 status update. We'll talk also about Java 25, of course. Some updates about the container image for the Jenkins controller and agents. We'll talk about the work in progress on images and a few words about Contributor Summit. Mark, Chris, is there anything you would like to add to the agenda?
Those sound good to me. Let's see, we've got
Yep, me too.
Windows agents or
Yep.
Windows, Linux. Oh, S390 we should probably put at the end of the list.
Okay. Yeah, I saw some things, but forgot to put in there. It looks like we had some problems with space on the disk or something like that. We'll
Yeah, I can
talk
tell
about
the
that.
story, and I think the story is I learned something new in infra team meeting this morning that I'll explore.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We'll get there when we'll get there. Now, Java 17 and 21. So there was a Java 17 end of life proposal for the Jenkins project. So March 31 of this year is the warning date in the admin monitor. So you'll get a message in red in your Jenkins controller if you're using Java 17 from March 31st, right, Mark? No.
Close. You've been
Ah,
seeing a message like that for the
oh,
last 4 months. And
yeah.
and if you ignored it for those 4 months, you will continue to see it for another 2 months. But in Jenkins Weekly, we have dropped Java 17. So Java
I
17
always
is,
fail
yeah, but
with this
that's
one
good.
because you and I are using Java 25 or 21, so I never
Exactly.
ever get to see that. Sorry for the wrong message. So yes, of course, if you're using Java 17 these days, you should already see that and still for a few months from now. By the way, if you we'll talk about that later, but if you're using the weekly release for whatever reason, from this week, you should not even be able to run on JDK 17, right?
Last week,
Last week. So
right? So it's
yeah,
already one
my news I
week
saw
that
last week.
Java 17 is off. But of course, we've been running supported Java 25 now for what, 9 weeks, 8 weeks since 534, 11 weeks. So yeah, so you've had time to make the switch. It's time to switch.
Yep. So Jenkins core now requires JDK 21. So bye bye JDK 17. Thanks a lot for your help, but at the end of it. So the next LTS will still be running Java 17, compatible with Java 17. It's to 541.1, if I'm not mistaken. And Chris, you are the release lead or co-release lead, right? Yes.
Assistant.
Yeah,
I
so
just, oh, yeah.
yeah, Shalini Sudarsan is the release lead, right? The release, yeah,
Yeah.
is Shalini is doing.
Thank you so much for your help with that. Now, so let's forget about Java 17 and move to Java 25. So it has been released last year, so it's old story. And Jenkins itself has been compatible with JDK 25 since 200 to 534. Yeah, and plugins are moving to JDK 25. Mark, I don't know if you are still monitoring how many plugins are moving to JDK 25 as a standard build, but I guess it's getting better and better. I had a look at the graphs earlier today, which are wrong. You know, the one I build with my statistics, which are plainly wrong, but the graph were showing adoption nonetheless. Even if my numbers are wrong, yours are way better than mine. Nonetheless, it's progressing, right?
Yes, over 90% of the top 250 repositories are already compiling and testing with Java 25.
And most of them upgraded thanks to a guy named Mark Waite, right?
Yeah, who did it? Actually, most of them upgraded because their maintainers were willing to merge a pull request, and we're very grateful for that. We didn't use the Community Plugin Maintainers Initiative,
Yeah.
and still we've been able to do a reasonable job of getting plugins to test with Java 25.
Congrats for that, because that's the work of one man. Wow. Impressive. Thank you, Mark. Now, if you want to have a look at what's going on with the progress of JDK 25 adoption, there is a GitHub project dealing with that. And Mark, you already started talking about the end of support for Java 25 3 years from now, right? I think I saw something that you created.
3 years from now, I think it's actually 2 years from now. Is it
No,
3?
3 years from now. That's strange.
That's something's wrong there. So it should be, well, I don't
Oh,
know. I'll have to think about that. So, because I'll have to look at the dates. The 2 plus 2 plus 2 thing, I may have it wrong. It should be 2028. It seems like we would go 2 years, not 3. No, no, 4 years. That's right. 2025. That's right. It is 4 years. So the date is correct.
cool.
I was wrong in
Thank you,
thinking
Mark.
that I was wrong.
Perfect. So yeah, there is no better time to switch to Java 25 that now because everything works with Jenkins and Java 25.
Well, and I have to admit, I am, thanks to Shalini's work creating the 2.541.1 release candidate
Yeah.
and the infra team's work creating Java 25 container images, I am testing the 2.541.1 pre-release with Java 25 exclusively.
Oh, and
So
it
the
does work.
pre-release, it's working very well for me. I've noticed no difference from between it and Java 21.
That's pretty cool. We'll see if this goes well for everybody. I just saw a message from Valentin Delay saying that he may have found a problem with JDK 25 and maybe something missing around the java.net. And this boo-boo may have been introduced by your
Well,
me,
yeah,
yeah, in fact. But
knowing
whatever.
which modules to include is not a surprise.
I
Module
wanted to
inclusion
do
is a dicey thing.
Yeah, because in the past we just could list some modules and do the GRE thing, whatever, and it was just working with Glink. It was pretty easy to have a small image. And this time it had to be redesigned because you had to know the exact list of modules you wanted to introduce. And for my test, I just found a few models that were working for my use cases. And that was perfect. So that's the way I proposed the PR, saying, if I remember well, some modules may be missing, your mileage may vary. And yes, it's happening. Sorry about that, but that should be a pretty easy change to do in the code base.
Right.
We'll see. So to this day, we have agents with JDK 25, the Docker agent and the SSH agent. We also have now images for the controller with JDK 25. So we are good to go. Anything else, a comment or question before we move on?
No, nothing for
No.
me.
Thank you. The container image updates for the Jenkins controller. So the last LTS 2.528.3 was released in December, last month, even last year. The dependency updates were about Alpine Linux and UB9. And the next LCS is just around the corner. It's scheduled for next week, so next Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. And the release candidate, Mark, you tasted, was released last week. Now, for the weeklies, so we had, of course, 4 of them, despite the end of year break, because we canceled one of the platform SIG meetings. So the breaking changes are to remove JDK 17 from weekly releases, and of course, replace Windows Server Core 2019 by Windows Server Core 2022. We'll talk more about that at the end of this meeting. Of course, we added JDK 25 images for the Docker controller, and we had a few dependency updates for Red Hat, UB9, and Alpine Linux. Now, for the Jenkins agent, we saw 3 new releases with no breaking change, only dependency updates for Debian Trixie, Alpine Linux, and no, not the Debian Trixie, of course, because twice doesn't do the trick. Okay, and my keyboard now is in English for whatever reason. Oh, God. Yep, that should be better. Now, 2 new releases for the Docker agent with only dependency updates, once again, about Debian Trixie, UB9, and Alpine Linux. Now, for the work in progress on images on the controller, I spotted 4 new PRs. I think all of them are linked to Hervé's work. Yes, indeed. So I'm not so sure I understood them all, but it looks like it's all linked to the use of the golden rules or golden files introduced by Hervé a few PRs ago. So the goal is to, hmm, how should I say that? To not have any regression whenever we change the Docker bake file, right, Mark?
Correct. That's exactly it. Make life better, easier, simpler for Docker maintainers, and make life better, easier, and simpler for release leads when they release things. Now they did note in Jenkins Infra team meeting this morning that we're going to switch that repository. This is important for Chris as well. We're going to switch that repository to use the same model for branching as we use for Jenkins core and the packaging
Oh,
repository. So we have a line that is the primary development line, and then we add every 12 weeks a stable -XXX line that is for that LTS baseline. So we're used to doing that with Jenkins core and with the packaging
mhm.
repository. We'll now also do it in the future. It will probably happen over the course of the next few weeks with the Docker repository. That way we've got a
Okay.
nice stable line that's
Hmm.
building the container images for the stable release, and we can use the same model across all three repositories.
That will prove handy, that's for sure. Thank you, Mark. As for the Docker agent, I saw two PRs, a long-running run about running each dedicated test in parallel, and a new one which is about building 2022 images from a 2025 agent. I think it's still in draft. So yeah, we'll see where this goes. Same for the Docker SSH agent. So the goal there is to add Windows 2025 images for this agent, but also to build 2022 images from a 2025 agent. And unfortunately, Hervé is not able to join today, but he wanted us to talk about the depreciation and archival of Jenkins CI Docker Inboot agent because it's been a while, maybe 2 years since we last used it and maintained it. So this is not needed anymore. And so we should discuss, the three of us, because we are just three, about the depreciation and archival. It's usually not the place where we vote for that kind of things, but I think somewhere in the ecosystem, in the community, we should discuss that and maybe have a vote or at least give your insight about what should happen. Mark.
Yeah, I think this is as good a place as any, and the people who are most interested in it are here or represented here. So I think this is a great place for us to say, yes, we're going to drop them. And for me, it doesn't make any sense to keep them. They are badly out of date, and badly out of date is really unhealthy.
Yeah, out of date. So we should also get rid of the Docker images associated with that.
And I'm less worried about getting rid of the Docker agents than I am about making sure that we declare on the documentation for the things that
Uh-huh.
they are obsolete. Deleting container images is rare. Most people
Yeah,
don't
I know.
bother.
Saying it, I was realizing, hey, you know what? We may have still some one dot something Jenkins Docker image available, and if anybody wants to run them, their own choice.
Yeah, so the on Docker Hub, the name of the things is JNLP-agent, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. And yeah, they're terrifically out of date. Interesting.
Okay.
No, they're not. Weird. They keep getting pushed, but
Yeah, that's
there's
strange.
no there's no right. But latest was last pushed 5 years ago. Okay, good.
Oh, 5 years. Okay, got it. Chris, what's your take on that?
I don't have a very strong opinion about this. So I support Mark's opinion.
Okay. And mine is along the same line. There is no value keeping them because they are way too outdated. Nobody wants to take care of them, and they're not needed, by the way, because they've been replaced by the other agent. So, but good. Thank you, folks. Now, support for Windows 2025 agents. So, as you may know, Windows Server 2019 reached the end of mainstream support 2 years ago. So it's pretty risky to keep on using that kind of images. So that's why we don't want to get it updated and working for us anymore. So we have to switch to Windows Server 2022 or 2025. And that's why mostly Hervé is working on that, trying to get images built around on top of Windows Server 2025. And Mark, I think you had some tries along the way with a new feature which is built in with Windows Server 2025 that may help with Windows build performance, which is called Dev Drive, right?
I did some initial experiments with it. I haven't done further since those initial experiments, but it looked promising, and certainly the Microsoft blog posts that describe it look very interesting. 20% performance improvement kind of claims, and we've got a configuration on ci.jenkins.io that sort of lobbies for that. We're already using a separate drive for Windows development work on our ci.jenkins.io agents, so a dev drive isn't terribly far from that configuration.
Cool. Thank you. And if you're interested in the subject, we have an help desk ticket to track the support of these Windows 2025 agents. It's from last September, but it's seeing new updates if it want to show up. Yeah, yesterday, last. So we'll see. That's an ongoing subject. Mark, now S319X, one of our beloved platforms. So what's going on?
Yeah, so Hervé had extended the Docker build process to natively build on System 390. And that the Docker build process, building native on System 390, was a kind of cool use case, very nicely done. We used to, and we probably will in the future, use QEMU instead to build System 390 because it's good enough and works well and works in multiple environments for us. What Hervé's transition did, and he's switched back now to using QEMU again, so it's no longer using System 390. What we found, though, was that the configuration we've got on System 390 right now seems to leak Docker buildx volumes. And because it leaked buildx volumes, it was filling the disk. And so I would have to periodically go in and scrub the disks. Damien and Hervé noted that there's a command line argument that you can use to tell Docker buildx to release its volume. And we weren't using it because we didn't need it. If we were ever to go back and build on container images on S390X again, we'd probably investigate what it takes to stop leaking those volumes.
Okay,
And
but
that's the
nonetheless,
story.
we'll use QEMU in the future.
For
even if
now,
that
for
would
now,
work.
the plan is to continue using QEMU. That's correct.
Okay, do we have any figures on how much performance we are losing with QEMU, or we just don't care because we don't pay cloud credits for these machines? Oh, yes, we do when using QEMU. My bad.
We do, but it's not the expense is
Terrible.
not well. The repeatability we get from QEMU is much more valuable than the cloud credit cost.
Oh, okay.
Right?
I
It's
see it now.
because, and Damien correctly points out that we in an unsafe environment, ci.jenkins.io, we build container images for test purposes. We never release from that unsafe environment. We always
Uh-huh.
release from a different environment that is independent. And
Yeah,
that
perfect.
different
Yeah.
independent environment needs a System 390 that is independent of the one we've got. So we need two.
Oh,
And we could ask IBM for two, but really one has been more than adequate for us up to this point. So QEMU is a good way to solve Damien's correct concern that we want to be sure that we're able to securely build and we're building in a safe environment.
okay. Thank you for clarifying, Mark. I was just thinking of my own experiences with QEMU, which I love, by the way. But I was seeing some performance issues, like maybe 1,000 times slower than on real hardware. So,
And what Hervé's observation was System 390 with QEMU is not the slowest part of the Docker build process.
oh,
And therefore, we
interesting.
don't have to worry about it. It's not the critical path. So,
Okay.
emulated System 390 is fast enough in the environment where we build.
That's pretty cool, of course, because I was thinking of my 6 minutes to 16 hours
Right.
ratio.
Right. And I don't claim to understand, although my guess is what's happened is IBM's done a very good job of making sure
Yeah,
that the emulators work really well at simulating System 390.
of course, I'm talking about Risk 5, which is not mainstream yet. So,
Right.
of course, very experimental.
Uh huh.
Thank you so much for your insight, Mark.
Thanks.
Next subject, unless you have some question or comments, is about Contributor Summit. So we should see a few of us in Brussels, Belgium, less than 2 weeks from now. So January 30 in Brussels, Betacor, 4 Rue des Pères Blancs, whatever. And I think we won't reach the 30-person quota. We're about 20 something people accepting to join us for the Contributor Summit.
Yeah,
We'll
I
see where
thought our
this
upper
goes.
limit was 25. Or the room has capacity for
Oh, you
30?
may be right. I think I was referring to a few years ago where we were supposed to have a bigger room, which
I
did not happen because somebody else, the evil, I won't name the name, took the room instead of us getting it. So, yeah, maybe 25. So we should
I
be
I
almost at full
truly do
capacity.
not know, but I'd limited our pool to about 25, and I think we'll have a full room.
That's
We've got
pretty cool. I can't
lots of
wait
people
seeing.
who have said
Yeah.
yes, and we'll see a bunch of them.
And Stefan Speaker, our new events officer, is working with me on the agenda. He has already contacted a few of the officers for them to update their part. And I think, Mark, you also gave some insight on what should be done. So thank you so much for that. So only not even 2 weeks from now, that should be pretty cool. And next day we'll be at FOSDEM. We have a booth at FOSDEM just next to GitLab. That should be fun.
Oh dear. Okay.
Yeah, interesting conversations. That's for sure.
Right. All right. Well,
At least it's not harness. But they are not open source, so that's not a problem. Okay. Any other subject that we should address before wrapping up?
none from me. Thanks, Bruno.
You're welcome, Mark. Chris,
None for me.
thanks a lot. Then let's wrap it up. The recording should be uploaded to YouTube from 24 to 48 hours, and we won't see each other 2 weeks from now. We'll see each other 4 weeks from now. So see you in FOSDEM, in the Contributor Summit, or online 4 weeks from now. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
And now let me find the right button. Yeah.